Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, today we will continue from the 19th word. In previous weeks, we read the first droplet, and the last week we specifically focused on the second droplet as well. Any comments on these droplets? In general, the topic that we were trying to look at, I mean, how this text started off was that there are, as Imam Nursi said, three great and universal things which make known to us our sustainer, right? And one was the book of the universe, the other, the seal of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the third being the Quran. And that the focus that he wanted to take for this 19th word was the seal of the prophets and how we can become acquainted with him and also have that conviction of him being a source through which we become acquainted with our sustainer. So any for those who were here, especially last week, anything that remained with you from the second droplet or any conversation points that we touched upon? I know there was some heated discussion concerning how we can come to know the Prophet, right? And whether the different aspects that the author highlights are accessible to me right now in my current state in the 21st century, right? Whether it's as he wrote in the end of the second droplet, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's extraordinary fear of God, worship, seriousness, fortitude, steadfastness, strength of belief, right? But anything from last week that you would like to touch upon or kind of flesh out more thoroughly? Do you remember anything from last week? I remember you speaking.
I from what I remember, we were talking again. I think the first droplet was about the tree of prophethood, and it was talking about the tree and he like the roots, the living roots, and how the Prophet ﷺ was like the trunk, and then the branches and like the leaves, I guess, are the saints and like let's say the followers. And then the second droplet was about it was interesting because it started talking about things like soothsayers and how even the soothsayers and the voices from the unseen were giving indications of the Prophet alayhi and it's talking about miracles like the splitting of the moon, and but then it's also saying things like the justice of the Sharia also confirm and corroborate him. So it's like going to a lot of different avenues and seeing how they all confirm the prophethood. And then it goes to like his morals and his he as a person, like it's saying he was the summit of perfection. And like I guess this is the part which interested me was he was saying in his duties the prophet had complete confidence and elevated qualities which were of the highest excellence, and his extraordinary fear of God, like he had an extraordinary fear of God in worship, serious, and like in worship he was very serious, and he demonstrated like a very high steadfastness in belief. And Nursi says these all show as clearly as the sun how utterly faithful he was to his cause. Like Nursi was speaking in such a strong manner, like saying the Prophet was the strongest of belief, was the most steadfast. Everything, like I think in the beginning it started with more like the indications, like the soothsayers and other stuff, and even going to like the Sharia things you can conclude. But then it was going to things which I was saying, how does he come to these conclusions, or how is he able to make such a personal um claim that the Prophet is the most steadfast, he's the most determined in his worship and has the most confidence in his belief, like these kinds of things, and like how we could breach, I guess, this huge gap of 1400 years where I don't exist there at that time to see him as a person, to witness someone like that. And I think what I remember from last week is the only real way for me to breach that gap and to have such a conviction in my Prophet والسلام, being like not just like saying yes, everyone tells me he's this or apparently he is this, but actually believing it or seeing it, witnessing it is through this tree of prophethood that we talked about in the first droplet. I need to find a prophet or to have a prophet in my life, to witness him in my life. I need to see all of his different students, or I need to see gleams or reflections of him in all of the different branches of the tree of prophethood. And I guess that means like all the different scholars or saints, different people we study like Imam Nursi, people around us that we see, and like basically reading their qualities and seeing, how it might reflect a trait of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. Like if someone is very generous and they do this in not their own name, but in the name of God, then I say, oh, this is a reflection of the way the Prophet was generous. Like the Prophet brought this message of being generous in the name of God. This person is now acting upon it. And now I can say, oh, I can see how my Prophet was truly the most generous. If this is like a student of the Prophet learning and acting. So I think it made it a bit more real for me, seeing that I can also witness as Nursi is witnessing if I kind of interact with others and I'm a person who reads others, and it also like says the necessity of community and necessity of attaching yourself or trying to find this tree rather than just going off alone. Like if you want to find the prophet, you need to find the tree. Um,
Right. One doesn't become acquainted with the Prophet in isolation. Right. Inshallah, through the people that we interact with, through the texts that we interact with, we become connected to that um lineage, to that tree of prophethood, as you said. Yeah.
Jazakallah. When Abdurrahman was talking about his moral character, how we can make sure that, as mentioned here, that he was serious, the high, which are the highest excellence, extraordinary fear of God, and so on and so forth, like his moral qualities. I guess at least to me, the more interesting question, whether what is recorded about him was true or not. The real important, like an interesting question to me, why such qualities were recorded to begin with, right? There's this famous twist. The person is trying to explain why the sky is blue. He start asking why sky has any color at all. Let's start from there. And then he says, I will explain why it is blue. So the same way, I guess, if we question why his moral qualities were recorded to begin with, then we can ask what kind of moral qualities he had, or whether they are trustful or not, and so on and so forth. But I guess the more important part there is for a prophet to be a prophet in my life, right? To fulfill the role of the prophet in my life or in anybody's life, he should be a role model with his moral qualities as well. I think this is the starting point, that understanding this, because we can follow some other alternative. We could say that, oh, who cares what kind of person he was? He delivered the message, he did his job, and I will read the message. But this attitude becoming more and more popular in our age, especially in Muslim countries. Right? He delivered the message. We have Quran. We don't need prophet. Like we don't need these. Who knows which one is really trustworthy, the trustful narrations. This is the popular movement now, right? So such a movement assumes that the human, the persona, of this prophet, it really doesn't matter. I mean, if he's a good man, good for him, and the people around him were lucky to interact with a good man, high moral, highest fear, extraordinary fear of God, a good worshipper, and so on, good for him. But to me, it's irrelevant, right? This is the assumption underlying this popular movement. Because the message is a written text, there is no human persona there. There is no moral qualities there. It suggests some, say, okay, act like this, act like that, and so on and so forth. But you don't have these moral qualities embodied in someone. It's just a book. And you just like reading another book, a history book or a non-fiction, any kind of book. You read the Quran, you read it maybe more serious and understand it. That's the idea. But here, author says, just like you mentioned, Abdurrahman, talk about almost irrelevant things, seemingly irrelevant things, starting from other older books, and then soothsayers, and then his own moral qualities, and so on, as if he's trying to say the prophet needs to have all these different dimensions, the faces. One face should look at the other religions, other prophets, the history behind, like before him, or in one face looking at the people today calling themselves as Christians. If you are following the true prophet, the prophet of Islam, Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, you should be able to talk to your Christian friends or Jewish friends, right? Talking about your prophet and somehow able to convey them the idea that this is the true prophet. You should be. That's the belief in prophethood. Another face of the prophet looks at anything, sciences. Like today's soothsayers are, the experts, scientists, and whatever. You should be able to talk to them as well and somehow convey them the idea that what you believe, the message that your prophet brought, the lifestyle that he brought, introduced, should also look at them as well. The same way, it's not just the message, his moral qualities, everything about him should be in your life. So I think the second droplet is extremely important. It defines what you mean when you say prophet. It's not just a carrier. It's a living person having multiple faces.
Jazakumullah khair. And I guess just one thing that I wanted to add there was, as you said, there is the necessity of moral qualities being present, right, in the person that I expect to be a prophet. But it also doesn't become sufficient in and of itself, right? There needs to be a quality in those an aspect in those qualities in that person's actions that also point to a creator relation as well. Okay, so if there's no more comments on the second droplet, let's move on and read the third droplet. It's not very long. And
together, just a suggestion.
Let's read the third droplet.
Okay.
And maybe we can have a voice from this side of the room to balance things out. Any volunteers? It's a very short, it's 2 paragraphs basically. Yeah, I'll tell you.
Third and fourth.
Just the third, let's start with.
If you wish, come. Let us go to Arabian Peninsula, to the era of bliss. In our imaginations, we shall see him at his duties and visit him. Look, we see a person distinguished by his fine character and beautiful form. In his hand is a miraculous book, and on his tongue a truthful address. He is delivering a pre-eternal sermon to all mankind. Indeed, to man, jinn, and the angels, and to all beings. He solves and expounds the strange riddle of the mystery of the world's creation. He discovers and solves the abstruse talisman, which is the mystery of the universe, and he provides convincing and satisfying answers to the three awesome and difficult questions that are asked of all beings and have always bewildered and occupied minds. Where do you come from? What are you doing here? What is your destination?
Jazakallah khair. Now, this doesn't come with necessarily reading it, but if would you like to comment on the third droplet as well? Of just any gist of what it might be saying? If not, you can pass it on to the person next to you. I'm sure they would have something to say. Whatever you might get from those two paragraphs.
I guess the main thing is that, like if I were to summarize it, is that it's describing a universal truth or some sort of message that is applicable to everyone and everything, because it seems to be a question that at some point everyone has asked of everything. Like, why am I here, or why are you here with me, or why is that thing created? And I feel like it's all saying that there's this one man, describing the man with fine character and beautiful form, that comes to answer just that question, or deliver that answer.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. That was beautiful. And as we were saying, I guess it points to, again, just as there needs to be the perfection of those moral qualities, right? I would expect to see that in a prophet, right? I also fundamentally, like, if this person is appointed by God, I expect them to have answers to my fundamental human questions. And these fundamental human questions, um, like, where am I coming from? I find myself existing in this world. How did this happen? uh, what am I doing here? Am I just here to kind of go through the motions of my life, as it were, as is kind of structured for me, go to school, then get a job, get married, have children, buy a house, get retired, and what should all that look to? What is the purpose of it here? And finally, what is your destination? What is my destination? Right? Does my destination end with my life in this world? Or um is there something more that which also my human, needs, expectations kind of yearn for, that I don't want my existence, the existence of my loved ones, even the existence of, let's say, my cat, to end. So what is the destination of this feeling, in fact, of my existence and the existence of everything I love, which includes, like a potted flower, right? Which includes the landscape that I see around me. So I expect convincing, as Imam Narsi says, and satisfying answers to these significant questions, right? That, as you were saying, Natalia, are, I mean, universal in one sense. At least for me, I can say, yes, I have it. And then I can ask you, and then you can say, oh, yeah, I have it too. And anyone who wants to deny it, well, they can deny it for themselves if they don't have those questions. Any further comments on this third droplet? Anything anyone wants to add? Yeah.
We need people to talk, please.
It's a neat place.
They're too shy.
They seem very comfortable.
I'm being mean to the men, by the way, not that side. So so just I thought I'm looking at the progression. Like the first droplet, we were talking about the tree of prophethood, and the second droplet we just summarized was talking about him more as a person, like his morals, his worship, how steadfast he is, how extraordinary in worship he is. And now the third droplet, if you ask me, I would say the third droplet is what really makes a prophet a prophet. I mean, this is like what I would say is what gives me conviction the most. Because it's saying, look, you have these questions. Where do you come from? What are you doing here? What is your destination? I mean, this is where I start for even looking a prophet, is when I have these questions and he solves these riddles. He's giving you answers for them. Um he's explaining the puzzle of the universe to you, the puzzle of the world's creation. I mean, so I was just thinking the third droplet, it's really what I look for. I mean, it's really where I see that I have questions, I need answers. But it's interesting that the way Nursi he brings this as a third droplet, I guess it kind of shows the first two droplets. There's this progression you go through, which maybe isn't even the message directly. I'm not sure. Of course, it's not linear for sure, but it could probably be everything together. But there's this progression of, I guess, you go through the tree, the community, the people, and then you find his morals, and you hear about him, you hear indications of him, you see signs of the truth of his sharia and things like this, and then you see the truth in his message, and how this message is explaining your questions and answering your questions. And I guess that's how we also go through that progression. I just saw that there's that similarity there.
Jazakallah. Yeah, I guess you know, when you find someone that is noteworthy in all those other aspects, or you find this message is also confirmed in all these other levels and degrees, as was being highlighted in the second degree, then you say, oh, wait, like maybe this person has something worthwhile that I should listen to. Like I should pay attention to. And then you see, okay, how do they answer these fundamental human questions I have? And I think, as you said, that's where like the unique prophetic function arises, right? Because I don't necessarily like I can learn how to be compassionate from my mother as well, right? Um, although, I might also see shortcomings here and there as well, right? I might be able to learn how to be kind, how to be patient in other different ways, maybe subpar in some respects, but still. But I need someone, I need a source to answer these questions, and to also not just textually answer them, but to answer them in terms of how it manifests into one's life, right? Okay, so where did I come from? How does that change how I'm going to live right now? How does that change how I structure my life? How does that change how I'm going to eat, how I'm going to sit, how I'm going to drink, how I'm going to interact with my friends, parents, family, right? So seeing, not just receiving the answers for these questions in a satisfying and convincing way, but seeing those convincing and satisfying answers lived out in a convincing and satisfying way, right? Because that's how something really impacts me, right? Like ethicists or others can kind of discuss, oh, the ideal way to live in this way or that way in ivory towers or other places. But it's when I see someone live it out that I become impacted by it. That the force of that answer is communicated into my state of being as well then. Okay, I will give the brothers one more chance. Any other brother besides Brother Birkan? Okay, then inshallah, Brother Birkan.
Um, can we go into like a little detail about what we want to learn from the Prophet's life, like before we get into this, like what Hadith really is and what we're supposed to take from Hadith, and then what is Sunnah, and like how it relates to the Quran and like how it should be related to the understanding of Quran, instead of like what is his morality, what he always did in his life, what was it meant, and like how it relates to Quran. Because like from where I stand, or like what I believe in is like you can't make commandments, or like you can't make fiqh from hadith, but you can see hadith and you can understand how to live your life like as the prophet used to live. But we should like there should be a boundary there like that we should draw. Maybe we can discuss that before like going into depth. I don't know if everyone understood my question, but
Just I wanted to make a quick remark because I think the way Nursi is approaching the topic is kind of an indication of this question you have. I mean, we all have, I guess. He doesn't. I don't think he even mentioned hadith once. Like, I don't know if he mentioned something like that, but there is definitely a community. Like, even if you didn't even know hadiths, like even if you grew up and you didn't memorize a single one, or you might have heard one, but there's still people who say, "Oh yeah, there's this person who existed at this time who was as Nursi was saying, like I mean, the first thing you see is you see a lot of different people who follow this person. You see the different trees and branches of people who follow this person, and then you go to these trees and branches, you interact with them, and you see some of these people like, yeah, there existed this person who was lived very faithfully, and there was even indications of him, and the laws that he brought forth make a lot of sense, and you hear all of these from the people, again, from like people, you're hearing them, and then the third droplet, it comes, it's like, oh, and there's this message that makes a lot of sense, and I guess here, like, it would go into, they would speak about the Quran and things like that, but even before you even dive deep into those, I see like there's this, you're following the people and you're learning from these people, and they're speaking of someone, you're getting like I guess secondhand, third hand information of someone. Maybe these people are teaching you the verses as well. You're learning from all of the different people how they read the Quran, what they understand from it, and all of them give you a different light. So uh I guess like the way I'm thinking is like I don't know if we even have to define what the Quran is or the Hadith is or the Prophet. Like from a lot of different communities and people, I mean, we should do it, sure, but from a lot of different people and communities, we hear about the Prophet, we hear about his character and the message and what the meaning the message brings, and this is the kind of the progression I see Nursi going through. It's like we're slowly learning more about the Prophet from people.
So these might be also related to the question. So the one important thing here is like when he talk about what the prophet is delivering, and you can take it as Quran is talking about, like when he says he's delivering a pre-eternal sermon to all mankind. You can take this sermon as Quran, like he used to give sermons by reciting or talking about the ayahs of Quran. But at the same time, you can take it as the narrations that we hear about him, about his life and so on. Because with every interaction he had with the companions, he was delivering a sermon, right? He was telling them what to do, what not to do, how to act, how not to act, and so on and so forth. So all his life was a sermon. So going back to, like before, talking about the next part, which is, I think, very important, when he says to all mankind, indeed to man, jinn, and angels, as if he's saying that, oh, I said before going there, okay, let me rifle to myself. So when we ask the question from a technical perspective, like when we say what is sunnah, what is hadith, what is fiqh, and so on and so forth. You can ask them as a technical questions, like asking for a dictionary definition. Then, like you basically asking like, what school of thought, what scholars are you following? That's the question boils down. If you are asking a technical question. And to answer to that, at least for me, I'm following the school of thought as Imam Nursi is teaching in his books, which is Sunnah is the entire life of the Prophet. To the extent I can connect, to the extent I can reach. When I have a question, what is the right way to do this? Right? Then this can be anything in my life. What is the right way to buy a new car? Like I have this question. So I can approach this question as, oh yeah, this is the car. It's about the, I don't know, the engine or whatever. It's nothing about the God. I mean, come on. I'm not going to ask Quran, or I'm not going to ask God to what car to buy. Right? The options are Subaru, Toyota. It's not an option. And others, right? Mitsubishi, maybe. Yeah, Subaru and others. And I will select one of them by looking at the catalogs. And I will look at the engine specs and so on of the cars. You can follow such a way, which I would call, I mean, again, following Imam Nursi's school of thought, which is a secular, naturalist worldview, right? There is another option, which is I ask the question like, what is the right way to make this purchase? Meaning, I was trusted some money. I was given some needs. And I'm given some feelings. My family and so on and so forth, all of them are given to me for a purpose. And this money is not my money. This need is not my need. So I should satisfy them. I should use this money as a trust. So just like, let's say I'm an honest, I mean, it's hard to imagine, but I'm honest investor, let's say. What is it called? Broker? Yeah. Just for an imagination, to entertain ourselves. Let's say I'm an honest broker and I have Mohammed Sial's money and I'm making an investment for this money. How am I going to act? Am I going to say, this is my money, I can do whatever I want? Or am I going to say, no, this is not my money. The money was trusted to me. I have to invest it in the best way that would please Mohammed Sial, right? That's the honest broker. The same way I say this money is trusted to me, these feelings, the family, everything is trusted to me. What is the best way to make this purchase that would please make it radhi, right? Please the owner, the creator, whoever trusted everything to me. That's my question becomes. This is now, let's say, non-secular, non-naturalistic, religious worshipper perspective. And I'm trying to answer this question. How am I use this money that is trusted to me, or resources, my health, the same thing, right? And I say, okay, let me look the one's life that I know was being pleased by the creator, right? The creator says, I am pleased with this man, the Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And I try to answer this question, what car to buy, by looking at his life. This is, to me, as again, a school of thought I learned from Imam Nursi, is the Sunnah, following the Sunnah. So the Sunnah is the thing that takes your worldly life and connect it to the Creator. You ask the question how my prophet would do it, which brings to your mind that there is an owner, the ruling of this owner, the Sharia. It reminds you that there's a Sharia in this world. I cannot act as I wish, right? Which brings the idea of Sharia, which brings you the idea of the owner, which takes you to the presence of the owner. This path, right? I take it as the Sunnah. But again, this is the school of thought that I learned from Imam Nursi. And connecting to our text very quickly, I apologize, I talk too much, but it's very interesting. He highlights that this is for all mankind, not only even all mankind, for all conscious creatures. The religion that you are following should answer the questions, not only for you, but your so-called Christian friends, Jewish friends, Buddhist friends, whatever friends, atheist friends, also trees, animals, everything. That's the true religion. That's the true, the message that the Prophet brought. You cannot separate, you cannot say that this is our Prophet, our meaning the Muslims' Prophet, is talking to Muslims and so on. No, there's no such thing. If what you believe is restricted, it's only true for a certain geography or certain culture, it means you are not following the teaching of the Prophet. You're following something else.
Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Any comments from this side? Objections? Questions? If not, I say let's read the fourth droplet as well. And although I pulled that will you summarize question afterwards, just to read any volunteers. Sarah, how about you? Let's hear from you. We haven't heard from you in the last few weeks, actually. I think you have the mic, right? The mic's there. And if you want to add a summary afterwards, that'd be great as well.
Fourth droplet. See, he spreads such a light of truth that if you look at the universe as being outside the luminous sphere of his truth and guidance, you see it to be like a place of general mourning, and being strangers to one another and hostile and inanimate beings to be like ghastly corpses, and living creatures like orphans weeping at the blows of death and separation. Now look, through the light he spreads, that place of universal mourning has been transformed into a place where God's name and praises are recited in joy and ecstasy. The foreign hostile beings have become friends and brothers, while the dumb, dead, inanimate creatures have all become familiar officials and docile servants. And the weeping, complaining orphans are seen to be either reciting God's names and praises or offering thanks at being released from their duties.
Any one sentence comments, even question.
I think that, yeah, maybe the question, because like in the previous in the third droplet, there was, I think, the question, or Brother Burkan was trying to explain whether he's referring to the life of the Prophet or the persona of the Prophet himself and what he did, or the Quran that he, it was revealed to him. And when we talk about like what's being said in the fourth droplet, where like everything is praising the name of God, this is more like mentioned in the Quran, right? Like this is how we know that, or we learn, even the Prophet himself, I believe he learned that everything is praising, everything like is created and praising the Lord, even if it looks to us as a dead, inanimate being, it's actually not. Like, no?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had a similar question as I was listening to your beautiful reading of it. Thank you. I mean, one here, I guess the first question that I want to ask for myself is that, okay, without this prophetic message, right? Without this Quranic message that the Prophet delivers and lives, is it true that the world becomes a place of general mourning? Like, is that true? Because if that's not true, then, you know, what's the all the acclamation here, right? If let's say we put aside our Muslimness for a moment, just for a moment, would our atheist friend be like, well, no, is would they confirm, oh yeah, the place is, I don't have that message, and the place, the world is general mourning, and beings are strangers to each other and hostile, and living creatures are like orphans weeping, death and separation. Is that the worldview that emerges without this specific, let's say, Quranic message that is delivered to me from the Prophet? I think that's a question I need to ask for myself of how do I see the world, and how does my world become transformed through this message, right? And I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was that when it said being strangers to one another and hostile, like I was thinking of documentaries, right? Like you have the lion and you have like these animals are just hostile to one another and they're attacking, and it's like, well, if I attack you first and I get you, then I survive and you don't. That's hostility right there, right? And those documentaries become just a sort of mirror of how we view ourselves as well. If I get this job, then you don't get it. That means I get the money that you would have earned. If I get this internship, well, or, if Izza gets that internship, I'm like, there goes my spot. Like, resources are limited. We're friendly, but we're hostile because there's only so many limited spots, you know? Someone gets the spouse I wanted to marry, I'm like, taken, you know? Or someone, oh, like with the housing market, even with the rental market, auctions, bids, your neighbors become your enemies during a snowstorm when the grocery stores are all out of stock of bread and the basics because we panic, right? So there is, I mean, just like even in my world right now, like I'm like, yes, alhamdulillah, I'm Muslim. There's that hostility. I see it and I live with it. And in fact, I live according to it sometimes, right? And it drives me into a state of panic, in which, yeah, like this world becomes a place of mourning for me then. I'm like, some people, I just got the bad luck of the draw. I ended up living in this zip code, and apparently if you don't live in that zip code, your whole life trajectory is messed up. Your salary is determined by, which country you're born in. Well, I was born in the wrong country then. Then my life satisfaction drops as well. Like all these different not just statistics, but descriptors of the world that I live in, right? Relations that I share with those around me. And what is sort of dictated to me makes it a place of sort of grief and angry competition and really of despair, right? Where, alhamdulillah, like I might not be a physical orphan, but everyone's out for themselves, you know? Was it Oliver Twist? I don't know, like there's only so much soup in the pot. And if you get a bowl, you get a bowl, and if you don't, too bad, you're going hungry. Right? And that can be extended to how we kind of see our lives in one sense, and how we're told our lives are. So how does the message that is brought to me then change this, is the question. Does it change this? Like, do I say, yes, I confirm this, but, everything else still kind of remains the same? And it says here that the light he spreads changes that place of universal mourning into a place where God's names and praises are recited in joy and ecstasy. The foreign, hostile beings have become friends and brothers, right? And so on and so on. And so, like, do I see that, I guess? And part of what I was thinking is that, yes, the Quranic message, if I just interact with the Quran, it tells me, yes, everything is in a state of glorifying the Creator, right? There is nothing on the heavens or the earth that does not glorify the Creator. But then what does that mean to me? Like when I walk down the street and I see the snow falling, how does that translate onto my lived experience? I guess, right? And I think for me, the prophet would be one that when he interacts with the snow or the sand or creation, the understanding that things are glorifying their creator is manifested in his experience and response, right? That, oh, it's not just the snow falling, but there's, oh, look at these qualities of purification, of mercy, of order being sent down through this snow, right? That snow is glorifying its creator. It's my sustainer. The one who purifies Philadelphia, oh, can surely purify my life and where I need it, right? I think that becomes then the prophetic practice. Message and living with it, responding, reacting to my surroundings, to my experiences, to whatever I see exhibited before me in such a way where it changes the world into a place of mourning, into a place of glorification, into a place of, as it says, joy and ecstasy, right? It doesn't become just textual. It becomes something that becomes transformative, in fact. This is how I understand it. I don't know if that answers your question. In terms of like, because I think it was an important question of like, okay, well then what is the differentiation between the Quranic message and what the prophet, the light that it's mentioning here is. But any further comments, objections? Yeah. Sorry.
Assalamu alaikum, Saira here. Mashallah, Asinur, right? You explained so well. I think I was thinking, listening to you, that there is a lot of superficial, like you said, limitations that we get overwhelmed by, which is true in the world that we live in. Things have to be a certain way so that we can make our bread and butter, or we can get along, so to speak, with people who we otherwise may not get along with based on different values. And then again, the survival issue as well. Like, yes, I want to, the best example, religiously speaking, to me is that when to me my way and to you your way. That's the impasse, redirection, so to speak, that we can have, so that we don't always find ourselves in a bind with conflicting interface with another who happens to be different. But here's a view I would like to offer about risk, because I think that when we talk about our providence, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give us, He has already told in different contexts in Quran that either I'm going to give more, and whoever I will, I'll give more, and I'm going to even restrict the earth on some. And He doesn't necessarily give reasons beyond the believers versus the non-believers, or that the trials are going to come for believers specifically, but then eventually their reward is with the hereafter, and He defines hereafter as it's going to be limitless and it's going to be forever. And what is with Allah, it's more durable. Then, if I look at the stages, I think that the means, the ends, we as Muslims and Muslimas can benefit from recognizing the prophetic path also, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all the prophets, in fact, that they were gharib in the sense that they were poor and they were shepherds. And so the maqasid, or the asbab in their lives, were quite miraculous, whether it is Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam or Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of the other Anbiya, Noah, Moses, Abraham, all of them. And then we see that Jesus, right, Mary, there is khair even in this poverty. Because let's say when we have a disease or when we have a loss, we are we are held to a higher standard because patience is expected, istiqama is expected, strong faith is expected, and hence humanly it seems impossible for somebody who has weak faith. But if we have a strong faith or a stronger faith, there is a very likely chance that inshallah with Allah's will we will we will be able to ride by and go through with conviction that eventually there is light at the end of this tunnel. The other thing that I want to draw attention to is that the risk factors and the timing is always with Allah. So in Surah Talaq, Allah Ta'ala tells us that you will find your risk from places that you didn't expect. But then, whether it is Layla fi Quraysh, Surah Quraysh, where Allah Ta'ala says that, and we made it easy for the Quraysh and provided for them and protected them from fear. So, like, there are contexts that I think this is why Quran is such a dynamic and for all times mercy and a source of healing. Because if I can draw upon it based on different life circumstances or even stages in my life that I'm going through, and nations can do it too, then there's infinite wisdom that can guide the believers and even the non-believers if Allah so willed. Finally, I'll say that the core of the faith, it has to be scalable. Allah is not going to feel like, or at least it's not written in Quran that, oh, because I put you through so many hardships, I'm going to let you go to Jannah for free. No. My istiqama and my surety in faith is the yardstick there. And the ikhlas with which I still held on to the rope of Allah. And I think that's where, even in times today, in all of the Muslim countries, whether it is internal corruption or external opportunistic animosity, because of which we are not doing as well as we should be, because Quran tells us that as Muslims and Muslimas, we are supposed to be the beacons as best as we can be. And we don't say it with a sense of arrogance, we say it with a sense of responsibility that Allah Ta'ala expects us to be at that level first ourselves, where we can hold ourselves to higher standards in belief and believing and living honestly and dealing with others fairly and justly and being modest and upright and patient and so forth. But then the conviction of faith and the consistency in istiqama is eventually going to help us find the motivation in the examples or the exemplars of our Anbiya alayhi salam and sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Jazakallah khair, this was my reflection. Jazakallah. And that's where the light is. Divine light as well as our own inner light.
Yak, thank you very much for those comments, right? And that notion of risk, I think, of sustenance, divine sustenance is very important. But then again, the question arises, right? How do I find that in the prophetic life? How does this concept, how can it transform how I live my life, how I interact, how I experience things, respond to things as well? Natalia, I know you want to say something. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so it still goes back to mainly like the point you were describing. As I was trying to process it, I like was thinking about a lot of things. When you first asked if we do see the world as a morning place without the light, I was like, probably not. Like everyone seems to, have, or not everyone, but there seems to you seem to see people having a positive outlook to life even without religion, right? Like you see that, right? And then you go into these thought exercises which remind me of quote unquote Abdurrahman's darkness from the retreat. Like, when you do these thought exercises, you do reach the conclusion that yeah, like it is a competitive world, and there is like without the reassurance that the light brings, there is I guess pain, to summarize. But then I wonder, like, is it like is the only way to fix that with Islam or religion in general, which does help a lot of people, because I feel like sometimes it is a like you can reach these conclusions that or reach the teachings that Islam teaches without ever encountering the Prophet. So then I wonder, like, I'm not wondering exactly what's the difference, but like, is it, yeah, like I just wonder that, like, what about the people that don't get religion and are not, I guess, in suffering? Is it like, yeah, they're good but they're not complete, or or is Islam really the only way? Astaghfirullah, like, I don't want to even say that out loud, but like, that's what I'm thinking.
I think I mean, before, if others maybe want to, and we'll have a comment, but I'll just briefly say something. My take on it is that I don't know about others, but I have problems in my life. Right? I have difficulties, I have anxieties, I have stressors. I can try, like, I can go to different sources, implement different techniques, or see if the answers that are offered to me alleviate that despair, alleviate those difficulties. And if they do, okay, that's my answer. Right? But if they don't, then I have to keep searching. That's one way in which I say la ilaha. Okay, this is not the source that I'm looking for. Right? I mean, it makes me think of Ibrahim alayhi salam's story, right? Like, it doesn't have to be the physical sun, star, and moon, but I can say, oh, does this philosophy, does this life principle, does this way of approaching the world, just having a pause, maybe one way is just keep a positive outlook. Does that really satisfy me? Does that make my problems go away in a lasting way? Does it answer those questions that I have in a fulfilling and convincing way, right? Of how come I exist? What am I to do with my existence? How am I to uh deal with my impending death and the death of all that I love and care for, including my planet, right? So that's something I have to answer for myself, because it's hard to gauge out other people, especially when we live in a time of demonstrative happiness, let's just say. So that's something I can be. Everyone has to be honest with themselves. But if I come to the message that the Prophet offers me, and I say, oh, I find contentment, peace, filling my heart, my questions, then I can say, okay, this is the divine source that I'm looking for, and this is how I'm looking for a lived way, right? Not just a theoretical paradigm that I don't see the practical implementation of, or that is good in theory but gets lost in practice, right? So that's my sort of brief answer.
I think I want to go back to your very original question and also what like the text was saying. When you get the universe on the surface level, I see some level of order and balance, but everything is designed in a way that everything goes into destruction. Like I remember, like when I was in high school, always my favorite season, but at the same time, it was the most painful season for me because like seeing the leaves falling off the trees, it would bring some like pain like that I wouldn't be able to explain where it's coming from. Just like uh, within that context, going back to the text and the claim that uh, it turns that like pain and mourning into something uh, more likable. How is that like, how does that happen? Like, is it some sort of mysterious way? Do I need to like recite the Quran so many times and then all of the sudden my world will be just lighten up? Or do I need to have a combination of different surahs that I should be reciting on a regular basis that will change my outlook, so I will not experience that pain anymore? So like when he says that, like his message transforms the things in a way that like there is like joy and happiness in it. What does that really mean, and how does that really happen? So like on the surface level, if the separation or the destruction that I experience is a veil, how do I get past that veil and see what's beyond it or behind it? And how does the message of the prophet help me to do that? Just that's what I'm wondering.
I think Natalia's question is extremely important, especially to understand what we mean with religion, or what we mean even with Islam. So if we look at the answer in Quran, and if we are honest to ourselves, like not just saying, okay, this is our book, we are reading it for the sake of reading and so on and so forth, but not that, just open the Quran, read the ayahs, and start asking the questions. When you do that, what happens? You realize Quran, which is, I mean, from according to certain people, is for Muslims, the people who call themselves as Muslim, talking about non-Muslims, unbelievers, munafiqun, right? The liars, the deniers, all these type of people talking about it, the Quran. You can take it as, oh yeah, the Quran is talking about other people. Like as Natalia is asking, what about other people who seems to be, the happy and so on and so forth. You can say that, oh yeah, the Quran is talking about them. They are just damned, doomed, whatever. But you can also say that, no, this book is revealed to me not not to Birkan, the Turkish guy or Kurdish guy or whatever guy, but to Birkan, the human. Just like the previous point is talking about. In the previous point, we said the sermon that the prophet was delivering, or let's say the message that he brings, which includes Quran as well, is for whom? Humans in general. Beni Adam, author says. So you can read the same Quran then as this Quran talking about these different attitudes, different states that I, as a generic human being, can have. So there is no such thing, at least according to Quran, that you call yourself as a believer, as a Muslim, and you are Muslim as a package, and you are saved. There's no such thing. Quran even says, all those who call themselves believers, believe, right? It seems Quran is telling me that to the extent you understand this message, you confirm it, you live it, and you see its reality, to that extent you are happy, you will be happy. To that extent you will be satisfied. To that extent you will be saved. But to other extents where you acting as an unbeliever, sometimes like a munafiq, then you will not be saved. Okay, so we apply this to someone who calls himself or herself as a believer. Let's apply the same thing to other people, whatever it means. To the extent a person confirms with the reality, confirms with the message that Quran brings, no matter what they call themselves, because what we call ourselves are mostly cultural, right? We know the word Muslim not as like outcome of the process. I've been through the Quran, Hadith, and so on, a question and so on, and then I said, okay, I will call myself Muslim. No, I didn't do that, right? It was given to me as title from my father and whatever. So forget about these titles. To the extent a person confirms with the Quranic teaching, can be happy, can be satisfied, and so on and so forth, to the extent. So again, according to previous point, like we should, at least this is my understanding, is that we should be very careful when we talk about the religion, especially what we have in mind is our religion. Because the text we are reading is talking about the human's religion. There's one religion. There's no such thing as, their religion, our religion, and so on and so forth. There's one true religion for the entire humanity. To the extent you attach to that, you can be satisfied and happy and so on and so forth. But of course, what I said shouldn't be understood as also, I can live as I wish. And because my heart is so clean, I will do the good deeds and so on and so forth. No, the point is not that. The point is acknowledging the true owner. Who is the true object of the worship? To whom you are worshiping? And so on and so forth, right? To the extent you approach the truth, you can be satisfied. Otherwise, no. To me, this is a very different understanding of the religion.
Just to add a little bit, can we also like see that there are also being showed signs, like every creation in this universe, as like in Quran it says 41:53, we will show them our signs in the universe and in their own selves until it becomes manifest to them that this is the truth. And there are like certain revelations in the Quran as well. And I think if you were to look at people that were on their deathbed as compared to like people that are living their life in their 40s, and then you ask them like how your life is, they would always say like they have like these regrets, and then they were showed these signs, but they should have lived like their life a different way. So I guess to answer Natalia's question is like, from what I believe or like from what I understand is like everyone is showed signs in their life. It is up to them like if they choose to look into themselves and make that their reality or not.
Jazakumullah khair. Any comments from this side? On which topic? Which? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I think I kind of have the same question. Like, so in the text it says that if you follow or the message of the prophet changes things from being looked as orphans or like inanimate beings just there to more lively, more happy. Everything is like worshiping and stuff. And I don't think we answered the question, how can we change our, perspective when we see death? So I agree that, like if you don't believe, if you're not a believer, which it seems like everyone is happy around us, as you said, like everyone is trying to be happy and satisfied with their lives, but the reality again is that if you don't believe in like in God and the hereafter and stuff, the reality is that every day you live is like you're closer to death, you're closer to being separate from your beloved ones. And as you everything you mentioned, it's all a competition. If you're healthy, if you're wealthy, you will survive this life, and if you're not, you will just be doomed. And the religion kind of changes this perspective, because what you have is something that is given to you, it's not yours. Death is not the end, there's something, you know, afterwards. So this kind of understand, but like there's still maybe it's just because the word happiness or joy or something is like means something else to us, maybe because like you still feel a lot of like sadness if you see death, you know, like if you experience someone's, like if you experience separation, although as a believer you're like, you know, inshallah we will meet again. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, like other things, you know, like you still feel yeah, again, sadness when you see injustice, for example, how it's so my point is, I think even if you're a believer, you're still experiencing and feeling all these kind of like yeah, whatever, depression and sadness and insatisfaction of what's going on in your life, and it's hard to change that perspective even if you believe that okay, this is created for a reason, you know, like yeah, I guess. So I'm just
Jazakallah.
repeating your question.
So yes, a +1 to Brother Osman's question of, which was, I think, maybe in brief terms, how does one experience this transformation of worldview? Right?
How does the outlook change? Yeah, like,
How does the outlook change?
message
Right. Do I recite this many times, or what?
and like sadness and turns it like transforms into some sort of joy that like your outlook of like universe completely changes, that like you are content with your life and experience
Yeah.
in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, my just thinking out loud, I think it's an important question. Like one, I guess it doesn't happen overnight, right? Like the Quran was revealed in the span of 23 years. We know that. But also, I guess like the things that I feel I have conviction in, okay, it says, you know, all things glorify their creator. Do I witness that? Do I stop to examine those qualities? And when I do I treat them for the conscious beings that they are? So what that means for me is, just a very sort of very simple example is when I see the moon or when I see the snow, do I say Assalamu alaikum snow? Assalamu alaikum moon? Right? When I get in my car, do I say Assalamu alaikum car? Like, or do I say, oh, these are inanimate things? You know, it doesn't have consciousness. Does the way I interact with the world resemble a different worldview than the one that I'm saying I believe in? Right? And I think, again, just I'm not saying this is like a fully satisfying answer, but for me, I think it starts at the very least with the language that I use and the ways in which I try to verbally communicate with the world around me. Right? Because then I can also eventually say, oh, salam alaikum to the sadness. This feeling is coming. It's a guest. It's being given. How can I greet you? How can I read you? Right? So I guess in one respect, perhaps it starts with the very accessible, very the parts of my life that I feel very convinced in, right? But yeah, I mean, yeah.
Just one thing to add, like whatever that is, I think that's also very much connected with what Birkan was like saying when you guys were recapping the discussion from last week. He said that like there is this like school of thought that like Prophet the Quran was revealed to him and he did his job, and now like it's up to us to understand the Quran, right? So like within that understanding, the role of the prophet is just a postman. There is a mail, doesn't know what's in it, just delivers it, and as far as his mission is concerned, like that's over. Is that really what our understanding of the prophet should be, or is that what really like actually Nursi is discussing here? I think that's also related with the question that we are asking. As opposed to that understanding, do we think that like prophet himself actually must be through similar life experiences that we are going through? And with those experiences, he was the addressee of the message. And prophet himself find answers to his own dilemmas and own struggles, like some sort of answers for his own issues, first and foremost, within like human conditions, right? And as a result, he's the teacher, he's the messenger. So like in that way, actually, we can relate to the message because first, prophet himself take the message and kind of like almost like a prism, like light comes in and then it goes into from the other side, it goes into different colors where you experience the different like aspects of the light. And when the message comes to the human spirit and human struggles, through that like understanding of that message, it becomes like a source of healing for different questions, different struggles that you go through. And that's only human also for us to be able to relate with the prophet's experience first, so that we can also get the message or some sort of guidance out of the message that he delivered. Because like in one of the, I think the first point that when we like read, he was the text was saying that he's delivering a message to the entire universe, right? So like it seems like that's what the author is talking about in terms of the process, but at the same time, maybe he will discuss that like in the upcoming points. It is still ambiguous for me how that process works in a way that the message and the practices of the prophet will transform my outlook of my perception of my reality.
Jazakumullah khair. And I guess just to one part of what you were saying, like when I look at the Prophet, peace be upon him's life, like, oh, this person, as you said, was a human being who also experienced grief. How does he respond when his child dies? Right? How does he respond when his wife dies, when he experiences separation, when he experiences this human reality that I too share, right? Sometimes in the same way, sometimes in different ways. So it's there I have a life that is not an abstraction, but very much so lived. And I think that also looks to the necessity that I require in having an example of, okay, what does it mean to implement, to live the Quranic message in such a way where it translates to the sorrows that I face in my life, right? But any further comments on this point? Priority? I'm sending it all. Okay.
I will use some technical terms just to show my authority. So the word believe, it's a interesting word. It is actually a transitive word, right? Like, which means it takes an object. Like you believe in something. But we mostly use it as if it is intransitive, meaning like it doesn't need an object, right? So we say, I believe, or we say, I'm a believer. But there's always a gap there in your sentence. When you say, I'm a believer, you didn't specify the object. You didn't say you are a believer of what. So we say, we believers, assuming that I know concretely what I mean there. But in reality, we don't. So, well, if I ask, you are a believer of what? You would first, a few seconds, stop. Like, what do you mean? I'm a believer. And then start, once you understand the question, you will say, oh, yeah, I believe in Quran and so on and so forth. You will try to find a proper object there. Why I'm saying this? Because like when we read such texts, there is this clear distinction in our minds, as if the one part of the text which talks about the darkness, it's about the unbelievers. And the other part of the second part of the text, which talks about the light, is about the believers. Yeah, right? And I'm part of the believer part. So my life should be full of light, full of happiness. When somebody dies, I'm not going to feel sad and so on and so forth, as if. But then what happens? We start developing this imposter syndrome. Like, I call myself believer, but my life is not full of light. Most of the time I see darkness. I live darkness. I experience it. I see the things mourning for each, like everything else and so on. You start saying that maybe I'm not a believer because it's so categorical, right? But you can also read the same text as two states of the same person, right? When you believe in, now let's make the sentence proper. When you believe in conflict in life, everything is nothing but the conflicting forces. If this is what you believe, or the moment you believe in that, the author says your life will become dark. The moment you believe in, again, let's specify the object, believe in the message that the Prophet brought and the life that he lived, which is the life is nothing but ni'mat, the blessing, a creation, an art of a wise, just, merciful creator. When you believe in that, the moments you believe in these, your life become full of light, or full of blessing, enjoyment. Now you don't have to have this imposter syndrome anymore, right? You say, when I believe in first thing, my life is dark, and I can confirm that. When I believe in the second thing, my life is full of blessing, and I confirm that as well. Then the question is not, yeah, we believers, for us, the life is full of enjoyment, but how about others? No, you say, in what moments of mine I believe in the second thing, that the creation of artful, merciful, wise, and just creator, and in what moments of my life I believe that it's the conflicting forces trying to survive. So we should, I guess, look from that perspective. Then text is saying that the prophet came and told us that, oh, Osman, you are living your life as if it's the game of survival. And when you do that, don't you see everything is dying, going for nothing, wasted, right? Your body, your beloved ones, and so on and so forth. This is not true, the prophet says. Truth is, everything in your life, with no exception, is coming from this merciful, just, wise creator. He's teaching us that. And in moments we believe in these, when you are believer of these, not the other one, then your life become a blessing and the light. And you can confirm it easily.
I think again, like whatever that message is, like that reminded me, Nursi has an expression. It's I think he's using for like the material existence in a way. He's an expression saying that in Turkish tenteneli perde, which means tenteneli perde, which means a curtain, but the curtains that we usually do like for the daytime, not the nighttime. So like once you focus your eyes on the curtain itself, you see the curtain, but like once you focus outside, you can see it through because it is not very thick, so there are like holes in it, so you can see what is behind the curtain. So I think the practices and the message of the prophet or the teaching of the prophet should be as such that teaching me how to look beyond the curtain that is prevailing the universe and the events taking place in the universe. So on one side, like if I focus on the curtain itself that is veiling the universe, all I see is that contradictions and material existence and all that conflict going on and bringing me to closer to my own death as I struggle to continue my life. But there should be a way for me to be able to see it through that experience. So like, I think it is not the point that like one is not going to go through like an experience that is not going to be, there will be no sorrow or no pain coming from the separation or from the experience. There is no such thing because every single individual, poor or rich, believer, unbeliever, we all go through the same kind of experiences no matter what. So there must be a way for me to be able to see through the curtain what is behind it. And what's behind it somehow must be connected with the names being manifested in that experience and within the creation. So I can see those names to reach the maker of the universe. So I can start making some sort of establishing some sort of relationship, making some sort of connections with him.
Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, we'll end here since we're out of time. But thank you everyone for your presence, thoughts, reflections. Inshallah, we can continue from the 5th droplet next week. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم